Story 1. Freshman year of college, I took a chemistry class that absolutely kicked my butt. The seating arrangement had us in groups of 4, and I ended up at a middle table on the left side, all the way at the end. Next to me was this guy named Zach. He was awkward, like, seriously awkward, and gave off those Reddit moderator vibes. To paint a picture, he was around 5 feet 8 inches, a little overweight, and had this scraggly, patchy beard that did him no favors. But, man, he was smart, especially when it came to chemistry. Actually, he just seemed like one of those people who's good at school in general. We started chatting a bit, mostly because he noticed how much I was struggling in class. I'd ask him for help, and he'd explain things to me. Pretty soon, he was offering to do my homework and even let me cheat off him during tests. Honestly, it was a lifesaver, and I never got any weird flirty vibes from him. He just seemed like a socially awkward guy trying to be nice. Eventually, Zach asked for my number so he could send me homework stuff, and I gave it to him. He was helping me so much that I didn't think twice about it. Fast forward to the last day of class. Zach totally blindsided me by asking if I wanted to go on a date with him after class. I was not into Zach at all. No physical attraction, completely opposite personalities. But he'd helped me keep an A in the class, so I felt like I had to let him down gently. I lied and said I was going away to Miami for a couple of weeks and wouldn't be around. I figured 2 weeks was long enough for him to lose interest. But then he asked, "What about when you get back?" I panicked and said something vague like, "Yeah, maybe I'll be around." He nodded, said, "Cool," in this super cringy way, and that was the end of the conversation. The rest of the class was painfully awkward. After class, I bolted straight to my car and drove home. I was a commuter, so once class ended, I was done. That night, some friends and I decided to go out. While we were out, I got a text from Zach asking, "When are you going to Miami?" I told my friends the whole story about Zach, how he got me an A but now wanted to date me. They joked that I should just go on a date with him to be nice. I laughed it off and said I'd respond later, but I was drunk and forgot. The next morning, I woke up to 2 more texts from Zach. One with just question marks and another that said, "You're going to ignore me now that you don't need me anymore, right?" I felt bad, so I replied, "Hey, sorry, I was packing. I'm going to Miami today." He responded almost immediately with, "Okay." That night, my friends and I went out again. While we were out, I got another text from Zach that shook me to my core. He wrote, "I thought you said you were going to Miami tonight." My stomach dropped. I showed my friends, and they were just as freaked out as I was. I replied, "What do you mean?" And he shot back, "Nothing. Forget it. I just don't like liars." At that point, I was genuinely scared. Was he stalking me? I looked around the bar, but I didn't see him anywhere. I decided not to respond. Later that night, when I got home, I was taking off my shoes when there was a knock at the door. It was 1 a.m. I froze. Then I heard Zach's voice say, "It's me." I wanted to scream. I was home alone. I yelled through the door, "Leave now, or my dad will come out and kick your ass." That seemed to scare him off, and he left. I immediately texted everyone I knew about what had just happened. My family, my friends, everyone. Some people said I should call the police, and I told them I'd go to the station the next day. But the night wasn't over yet. At 3 a.m., I got this long, creepy text from Zach. It said, "I'm feeling a lot of emotions right now after being used by someone for months and then lied to. Hurt and anger are 2 of them. I thought from the start of the semester in chemistry class that our chemistry was through the roof. No pun intended. I must say I'm hurt that you would make up something as elaborate as a 2-week-long Miami trip just to avoid going out with me, even after I stuck my neck out for you all semester and risked my own academic standing. I definitely noticed the way you looked at me sometimes in class, and I can't pretend there wasn't a hint of interest there. All I'm asking for at this point is 1 date. That's it. I'm not asking for your hand in marriage, though I surely would be quite an ideal husband, if I do say so myself. I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt that you needed more time to think over the prospect of going on a date with me. I know how much I have to offer, much more than these losers all over campus. If you want, I can come back to your house and we can talk about it in person. I'm only making this offer once. I'm just very crushed to feel like I wasted so much this semester for nothing in return. Yours truly, Zach." I was horrified. I sent the text to everyone. I called my dad, who was furious. He texted Zach a long, threatening message and tried calling him multiple times, but Zach didn't answer. The next day, I went to the police station and showed them the texts. They said they'd contact Zach for questioning. Zach didn't answer their calls or texts either. He completely vanished. I never saw him again, not on campus or anywhere else. Between the police and my dad's messages, I think Zach was scared out of his mind. Thankfully, that was the end of it. But now, I know what it's like to deal with a real stalker, and it's terrifying. Story 2. It was during my junior year of high school, and it was the very last day before summer break. Most of the students either skipped school entirely or left early after lunch, and my friends and I decided to join the latter group. The weather that day was gloomy and stormy, with dark clouds hanging low in the sky. Originally, a bunch of kids in our grade had planned a trip to the beach, but the weather ruined that idea. Instead, my close group of friends decided we would do something else, a little more daring, you might say. There was this old, abandoned elementary school in town that had not been used for at least a decade. The building was scheduled to be torn down later that year, so it felt like our last chance to explore the place. With the storm keeping people indoors and no security cameras around, we figured it would be the perfect spot to mess around on the last day of school. Our friend Jack was the only one with a car and a license, so he drove the four of us over. The school was tucked away in a quiet neighborhood, far from any main roads. The back parking lot was hidden by overgrown bushes and trees on one side, with the school walls forming the other two sides. It was a perfect place to park without anyone noticing. The building itself was locked up, but Jack had come prepared. He grabbed a baseball bat from his trunk and walked up to one of the classroom windows. Watching him take the first swing made my stomach churn. Even with the rain coming down hard, I was worried one of the neighbors might hear the sound of shattering glass. Jack smashed the window with a couple of hard swings, then used the bat to clear away the jagged pieces left on the frame. He waved us over, and one by one, we climbed through the broken window. I will admit I was nervous, but my logic was that the place was going to be demolished soon anyway. What harm would a broken window do? The window led straight into what looked like an old 4th or 5th grade classroom. The room was still full of desks, with some decorations clinging to the walls. It was eerie to think this had once been a place full of kids learning and playing, now reduced to a cold, abandoned space collecting dust. The sound of thunder outside added to the strange atmosphere. There was no power in the building, so we relied on the flashlights on our phones to get around. Even so, it was not pitch black, as some light from the stormy day filtered through the windows. We began exploring, moving from classroom to classroom. Each room was just as we expected, filled with old desks, chairs, and remnants of a school that had been forgotten. As we wandered the hallways, we heard something. It was a faint sound, like a shuffle or a creak, echoing from somewhere down the hallway. We immediately went silent, switching off our flashlights. A flash of lightning lit up the hall for a brief moment, but we did not see anything. Trying to laugh it off, we convinced ourselves it was just the building settling, or maybe the wind. Still, the noise had put us all on edge. We kept moving, trying to focus on exploring, but the tension was growing. At one point, I glanced back down the hallway we had just come from and froze. In the doorway of one of the classrooms, I could swear there was something, a shape, barely sticking out. I whispered to my friends, and they all turned their lights toward it. The moment our beams hit the doorway, the shape moved, pulling back into the room. We all swore under our breath and started running down the hall. We ended up in what seemed to be the kindergarten wing, with tiny chairs and colorful posters still clinging to the peeling walls. Another sound echoed through the building, this one louder and closer, like a footstep or something being dragged. Panic set in, and we ducked into one of the classrooms, shutting the door behind us. We turned off our lights and huddled together, trying to stay quiet. The rain pounded on the roof, and the thunder rolled every few seconds. Suddenly, the door handle clicked. The door creaked open, slow and deliberate. None of us dared move. At first, the doorway was empty, just a void of darkness. But then, something appeared, a head, slowly peeking into the room. We all froze. When the next flash of lightning illuminated the room, we saw it clearly. It was someone's head, staring right at us. My heart was racing as I stammered out an apology, saying, "We are leaving now." The person did not respond. They just stayed there, completely still, watching us. Jack, being the brave one, or maybe just impatient, grabbed the bat and handed it to me while he worked to unlock one of the windows. He slid it open just enough for us to crawl through. One by one, we climbed out. I was the last to go, and before I did, I glanced back at the doorway. The head was still there, unmoving. I crawled out as fast as I could, half expecting to feel someone grab my ankle. Once outside, I sprinted to catch up with my friends, who were already running toward the car. We jumped in, and Jack floored it out of there. That old school was demolished later that year, and now it is just a park. To this day, we have no idea who or what we saw in that building. Whether it was some kind of worker or just a stranger, the way they acted was beyond creepy. It is a memory that still gives me chills whenever I think about it. Story 3. It happened so long ago that most of the details feel fuzzy now, like trying to piece together a dream you had years back. I will do my best to share everything I remember, though some smaller parts might be filled in with how I believe it all unfolded. It was the last day of school, and I was in 4th grade. At our elementary school, kids had to be picked up by a parent through 4th grade, but once you hit 5th grade, you were allowed to walk home by yourself. My mom always picked me up on the last day of school. That day, I was especially excited because my friend, Jason, and I had a playdate planned to celebrate the end of the school year. Jason and I were best friends. We had been close since kindergarten, though this year, he was in a different class. That also meant he was dismissed from a different hallway than me. When the final bell rang, my classmates and I formed a neat line, single file, and followed our teacher, Mrs. Green, down the hall. We exited through the door where parents were gathering outside, parking their cars, and shuffling through to pick up their kids. I waited patiently, watching for Jason's dad to appear in the crowd. Then I heard my name being called. Tommy, Tommy. I looked over and saw a man waving at me. He walked over and introduced himself as Jason's uncle. He explained that he was picking me up that day. Not thinking much of it, I walked up to Mrs. Green and said, "I am being picked up by Jason's uncle." She glanced over at him, and when I pointed, he smiled and gave her a friendly wave. Without hesitation, Mrs. Green dismissed me, and I followed the man toward the parking lot. He was a fast talker, really jittery too. It was like his words were trying to outrun each other, and he had a slight stutter. He walked so quickly I struggled to keep up with him, especially with my backpack weighing me down. He told me that Jason's dad got tied up at work and could not make it, so he had been asked to pick me up and take me to their house. We reached his car, which was a dark red hatchback. That was when it hit me. Where was Jason? I expected we would be picking him up too. So I asked, "Why are we not getting Jason?" He turned to me and said, "Oh, he is already at my house." That answer felt off to me. Something about it made my stomach turn, but I was not the type of kid to question adults much. I stayed quiet as he started driving. The man kept talking, asking me questions like what sports I played or what I was learning in school. I gave him short answers while trying to figure out what was going on. We drove for about 10 minutes, which felt strange because Jason's house was not that far from the school. My house was only a 5-minute walk, so I knew we were going way out of the way. The neighborhood we were in looked unfamiliar, and when he finally parked in front of his house, I felt uneasy. His house looked normal enough from the outside, but as soon as we stepped inside, I felt my chest tighten. The place was dark, so dark it almost felt like nighttime inside. All the curtains were shut, and the only light came from a dim lamp in the corner of the room. He locked the door behind us and gave me a smile that made me even more uncomfortable. I finally asked, "Where is Jason?" He paused, his jittery energy shifting to something almost nervous. "Oh," he said, "he is downstairs playing video games. Just wait here, and I will go get him." He disappeared into a nearby room, and I heard a door creak open before his footsteps descended into what must have been the basement. My heart was racing by then. Something felt very, very wrong. I tried to open the door to leave, but it was locked tight. I panicked but tried to keep calm. There was still a tiny sliver of hope that Jason might walk up those stairs, but I knew deep down it was not going to happen. I did the only thing I could think of. I went to the kitchen, found a phone mounted on the wall, and dialed 911. When the operator answered, I whispered, please come to this house. I have been kidnapped." I heard them acknowledge me, but I did not say another word. I carefully placed the phone under a dish towel on the counter, leaving the line open, and hurried back to the spot where the man had left me. He soon called up from the basement, saying, "Tommy, come down. Jason is down here." When I did not answer, he came back up, looking annoyed. "Are you okay?" he asked, his fake friendly smile gone. I was shaking. I stammered, "Can I leave?" That was when his face changed completely. The fake warmth was gone, replaced by something much darker. He grabbed my wrist tightly and started pulling me toward the basement stairs. I screamed and cried, and he shouted, "I will let you go if you stop and behave." Too scared to resist further, I went down the stairs. He shut the door behind me and locked it. The basement was cold and unfinished, with bare concrete floors and a single exposed light bulb hanging from the ceiling. There was a single support beam in the middle of the room, and it felt like the kind of place where bad things happen. I sat there in silence, my heart pounding. I could hear his footsteps above me. At one point, he opened the basement door and asked if I was hungry. I told him no because I did not want him going into the kitchen and finding the missing phone. It felt like forever, but then I heard it. The doorbell rang. It rang again and again, followed by loud banging. My heart soared when I realized it was the police. The banging and ringing went on for a bit, and then I heard a loud crash and shouting voices. I screamed for help and ran to the top of the stairs, pounding on the door. It swung open, and a police officer grabbed me, pulling me out of the house and into safety. There were cop cars everywhere outside. I saw the man being led out in handcuffs, and that was the last time I ever saw him. My parents arrived shortly after, my mom crying uncontrollably. Later, I learned that the man was a former coworker of Jason's dad. He somehow found out Jason's dad was supposed to pick me up that day and used it as an opportunity to do something horrific. Looking back, I feel lucky to have survived. If I had not thought to call the police, I do not think I would be here today. My mom took me to counseling for months after that, and even though it has been nearly 2 decades, the memory still haunts me.